Pre-game stuff. Everybody online just think we're just getting here for the first time. We had all kinds of fun. So welcome to anybody watching us online. We are doing 3 chapters tonight. You weren't aware of that, but 36 was so fun. And so is 38. Most of the time we'd be spent in chapter 37. I'm assuming you guys read before we got here. Any questions from what you read? This is just like a class in university. No one talks. Everybody just...
You have the flipping of pages.
Okay.
But you don't have that in class.
You don't. They all have the electronics. So, all right. Well, chapter 36 is the end of Uncle Esau's story.
Right.
And I call him Uncle Esau because as we move into chapter 37 and on, basically 25% of the book of Genesis revolves around Joseph. Did you realize that?
No.
25% of Genesis. From this point on, Joseph will be the main character. So Esau will come and go tonight. God had a plan for Esau. We go back to Genesis 25:23. We see that God had a plan for him. And Esau kind of did his own thing. So this is kind of broken into 2 sections, his life in Canaan and his life in Seir. So it goes back to Genesis 28 and then Genesis 36 we're in tonight. So it kind of divides his where he lived and what he did. I don't. Do you want to read? It's all genealogy. Do we want to read chapter 36? Should we let John read and just have fun?
Poor John. I'm leaving.
Abraham was determined not to allow Isaac to take a wife from the Canaanites. So what does Esau do? He marries 3. There's 3 women. One is from the Canaanite culture. One is from the Hittites. But he goes against what his father would have wished. But God still blessed him. Why? Thank you. He's still a descendant of Abraham. So he's in the area of Edom, which is named after him, the Edomites. Who is the last Edomite that we see in Scripture? Yeah, that we see in Scripture. You want the platinum star tonight, don't you? Say it loud, though. You got to earn it.
King Herod.
There you go.
That was back here.
There you go. Yep.
I do listen in church.
This is good. This is good. And you see what he did with Jesus from the line of Judah. So you have the Edomites in the line of Judah. And what happens there when King Herod commissions all the babies in Bethlehem to be killed. Trivia question about how many babies were killed in Bethlehem?
Did you ever get a number?
No, it's a speculation.
Then I have thousands.
It's single digits. It's not thousands and thousands.
I thought it was like 15.
Yeah, it's between 8 and 12. So of male boys 2 years old or younger in that area is what they're estimating. Josephus is the one that gives that information to us. So yeah, so it's
between 8 and 12. Give
Yeah.
her grace.
wow. I don't know what he said. I just saw you. Oh. Everybody on the line said, "What happened? What happened? What happened?" So Esau married 40 years before Jacob did. And then you go into basically what he did. The Edomites were not kind to the Israelites. We see that in Numbers when Moses wanted to pass through there, they wouldn't let him. We see Jeremiah and Ezekiel both have strong prophecies against Edom. Again, that's God speaking through his prophets. You have Jeremiah 49. You have Ezekiel 25. They're both in your notes. When you look at the offspring through all this genealogy, one that sticks out is verse 12, which becomes the Amalekites. They are also enemies against Israel. So there's nothing good that comes out of this. The Hortites, which is mentioned there, again, become descendants of Esau by intermarriage. So they are intermingling, and that's exactly how the Edomites are done away with. They intermarry, and they get in the Mosaic period. In the Maccabean period, they kind of get done. They're intermarried into the other culture. So Saul was the first king that was defeated the Edomites. That's in 1 Samuel, where Israel is actually able to stand back up, and that's really what chapter 36 is all about, just the genealogy. So Esau, I call him Uncle Esau because, again, we're going to transition to Joseph right after this. So that's really 36. Doing that, that's why I thought, you know what? That won't take long. Let's do 3 chapters. And we'll be ahead of ourselves. So with that said,
Can I ask a question?
I don't know. Is it a good question?
I hope so.
Okay.
Is Edom Jordan?
Yes. It's Petra.
Okay.
Yes. When you look at Jordan in the Bible, you have Ammon, Moab, and Edom. So north, middle, and south. So when you see those 3 in Scripture, that's modern day Jordan. Or if you watch the movies, it's Mars.
Yeah, that's what it is called.
What movie was that? It was filmed there in Jordan. He gets left. Who was the actor? Was it? He's the guy from Boston. Who was the actor?
Oh, yeah, like Matt Damon or.
Yeah, I think it was him.
It's like
Yeah, he
Mike
gets.
Martian?
Yeah, he gets left behind, and yeah. So that's filmed in Jordan, by the way. All right, Genesis chapter 37. We're gonna get into Joseph here. He has dreams and so on and so forth, and I trust you read this chapter. So here's the question. Where is the hand of God in these verses? Yeah, we see Joseph with his dreams and his brother, and they throw him into the water system, and he gets sold. Where is the hand of God in these verses? I want you to keep that in the back of your mind as we go through this. What sin did Joseph commit?
He was a little prideful.
He was very prideful.
Okay.
I don't think that was intentionally, though. I think he was just
Naive?
naive. I know he's naive.
He's
Okay.
17, he was a young baby.
He was the
He was
favorite.
treated, he was a favorite, he was treated different.
Well, in that culture, at 13, you're a man, though.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so.
Favored by his father.
All right, if you were going to write the story of Joseph, what would you write about?
His innocence.
His innocence? Okay.
He was
Coat of many colors.
His coat? Okay. What would you say about it?
Well, the coat created problems for the family. I mean, they
Yeah.
all were jealous because the father favored him, and as a result, they hated him.
Did the coat create problems or did the brothers create problems?
The
Well,
dad created the problem.
it was
It's what?
The dad created the problem.
It's favoritism. Well, why was Joseph his favorite?
Because he was his favorite wife.
Later years.
He was the firstborn of Rachel.
Right.
Right.
Rachel.
We would have called him a tattletale, possibly. But when you look at that, his brothers were not accountable to him.
No.
And he had no authority over them.
Right.
But you have to wonder, was his lifestyle different than his stepbrothers? That's what I say. If you were going to write his story, what would you write about? What angle would you take to tell the story of Joseph? Yeah, his brothers wanted to kill him, and one stood up, Reuben stood up and said, no, we're not going to do that. And they threw him into the dry water cistern, and they left him there. Then they sold him to slaves, so on and so forth. We know the facts, but is there more to Joseph than those facts? And if so, what would you write about? Because you're going to see him for the rest of Genesis. Yes.
I think I would write, at this point when he's 17 years old, I would present him as somebody who is pretty spoiled, just thinks that they're having the world handed to them. He gets to wear the coat and go around and watch everybody else work while they do their thing, and he tells Dad what a bad job they're doing. And I think I would have written him off as an entitled young man. I understand why they didn't like him.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. Yes.
But after all the testing that he went through, he was always loyal to God.
Yeah.
Right, but that's not,
For being so
but that's
young.
not when you're 17.
For being so young to be sold, he never complained.
Right?
Yep.
He passed all the tests.
Yes.
Passed all of them.
Yep.
Alright.
And that's why I changed my opinion as we go on.
Yeah.
But right now, when he's 17, I'm thinking, what a brat.
Well, let's talk. Okay, let's talk through your opinion with this. What's that?
I just think he's naive. I think he's saying his dreams out loud.
Okay.
He didn't ask his dad for the coat. He didn't ask his dad for special treatment, you know? I think his character plays out through his life.
Okay.
Who he is.
Okay, this is good stuff. Anybody over here? Tell me, just give me a description of, going fast forwarding to the New Testament, of Thomas. Give me if you had to say, this is Thomas, and describe him for me. What is Thomas? The doubting Thomas. See, he gets stuck with that label.
Right.
Is it fair?
No.
No. Why?
He wasn't there. He wasn't there.
He missed a church meeting.
Right.
Never missed church meetings. That's the moral of that story. Because the week before, Jesus appeared, and everybody was there, but Thomas missed the church meeting, and they put their fingers in, and they did everything. Then they went and told Thomas. And what would your reaction be if you heard something happen in church? If we had Starbucks come in and In-N-Out come in, and we served that, and you would say, well, I want my hamburger and coffee. I didn't get one. You know, I wanted to do what they did. So same thing with Thomas, because the guy did it the week before. So Thomas says, well, I won't believe like that until I get to do that. And because of that, he gets labeled with the label of being doubting. But he was not doubting. He did nothing different than the other guys did. And he was courageous. He was willing to go and die with Jesus for that. When Jesus was going to go back to Lazarus, go back to that area which they ran him out of town. He said, well, if they're going to kill Jesus, then I'm going to go down with them. You know, so you see that as character with him. I use that as a parallel to bring it back to Joseph. Because, okay, he's 17. But let's look at Romans chapter 12, verse 2. Paul was a student of the Old Testament. So as he's writing Romans, look at Romans 12, verse 2. Anybody have that? Just go ahead and read it out loud.
Right, immediately.
Do not be conformed any longer to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind.
All right, do not be conformed to the world. Now let's look at Joseph. What were his brothers doing? In order for him to be a tattletale, in order for him to bring a bad report back to dad, what were they doing? Yeah. So is he not conforming to what they were doing, even at 17? And was he saying, you know what, you guys go do that, I'm not going to do that. And what if dad asked him? Because he knew he would get the truth. He wouldn't lie to his father. Is he still immature? Is he still a tattletale? Does that change his character possibly? Because we do see his character throughout the rest of this book. And he does stay loyal and faithful and committed. And he has a strong set of boundaries. Just because he's 17, we look at it and we want to put the label on him while he's a tattletale and he's immature. He may not be the most tactful. You know, when you have the dream, and we'll kind of get there in a minute, but the way he presented it probably isn't the most tactfulness, but is that a sign of maturity or what? So it is kind of, I just want you to kind of get a picture in your head of who Joseph is, because if you had to write his story, what would you write about? Would you write about the events, or would you write about the kind of person he is? And then what kind of person is he? And you kind of guys, all of you guys kind of came up with some nice answers there. So I just kind of want to challenge you that. I don't see where he committed sin. Where is the place where he committed sin? You know, and God never calls him on that. So is he a tattletale? Don't know what the situation was. Did he learn his father's trade like his brothers did? He was out in the field, but I'm not sure he really picked up how to breed sheep or how to chase away a predator like a real shepherd would do. We don't really see him taking on the family business the way that his other brothers did. And when the other brothers were out there with the sheep and doing things in the field, who knows what the brothers did for the bad reports that came in. And he just said, I'm not joining in with that mess. I'm not going to do that. So he was kind of, to me, he was kind of standing out as far as that character goes. And that's just me, and we can have different views on that, and that's fine, but it's like Thomas to me. Thomas got a bad rap because he missed a church meeting, which is a point there, but I think the same thing happens with Joseph at some point. So, what chapter are we in? We're in 37, right? Yeah. Verses 1 to 4, we're moving on from Isaac, we're going to be moving on from Jacob, and we're going to be focusing on Joseph for a lot of this. But let's read verses 1 to 4. Anybody? Thank you, sir.
Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah, and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father an bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he had made a richly ornamented robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him.
Okay. So it kind of gives you a little picture of the personalities and the way the brothers acted. Kind of gives you a picture of who Joseph, how dad liked him. And really, this is a family dynamic. When you look at this whole family, Isaac loved Esau more than Jacob, but Rebekah loved Jacob more than Esau, and then Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah, and now Israel loves Joseph more than the others because he is the firstborn of the love of his life, Rachel. Second youngest child, but the firstborn of Rachel. So there's been favoritism just in the family tree, and that's kind of been a family dynamic, which I'm not saying it's right, it's just the way the family has kind of lived. It's interesting with the robe. Does any version you have a different word than a robe? Tunic. What do you think this looks like?
Rich.
Something bright.
My Bible describes it as it was a gown suitable for the virgin daughter of a king. So-
Why does your Bible quote it that way?
I don't know, I'm going to look it up.
Look at 2 Samuel 13.
Okay.
Go to 2 Samuel 13. I should have put this in your notes, but I didn't. 2 Samuel chapter 13, verse 18. And Becky will have her answer.
All right. So his servant put her out and bolted the door after her. She was wearing a richly ornamented robe, for this was the kind of garment the virgin daughters of the king wore.
And what did you say it was?
A
Beforehand?
robe. A robe.
What kind?
A rich, like the kind that the virgin daughters of the king would wear.
We get the same word. This will give it a picture of that. Now, besides the colors are one, and we want to focus the colors. What we need to focus on is the sleeves, because it says that when you look at this, what's it say? Actually, it's going to be later on. It's going to tell us. If you go to the RSV, the Revised Standard Version, it tells you that it had long sleeves down to his wrists and his ankles. So a tunic all the way down to the ankles and down to the wrist. Why is that a big deal?
Can't work in
I think you said it. What was it?
that. You can't work in that.
No, you can't work in that. So this is royalty. This is a boss. This is a supervisor. The working man would cut the sleeves off any jacket they had. So when Dad gave him something that went down to his wrists and went down to his ankles, this became a picture of that. And again, in Scripture, without trying to look at this and figure out what it is, 2 Samuel 13 tells us that this is the daughter of a king. This is royalty. A tunic like this would not be a garment that the working man would wear. So this is not something he's going to wear out into the field while he's trying to be a shepherd with that. Yes.
Though in the first between verses 1 to 4, though, it does say that he was pasturing the flock with his brothers.
Yes, but how often? And now he gets the jacket afterwards, or the tunic afterwards too. And we just don't, as we see him progress, because as we move into this, the brothers are off taking care of the sheep, and Joseph is home.
Okay.
So we don't see where he's really taking on the father's business. He's not learning the dad's trade, as well as the brothers did. The father seemed to favor him. Why that's taking place, we don't know if that's something that dad's doing or he's doing or how it's done, but he stands out in that regard too. But the fact that he has this tunic on, this robe, this royalty, it kind of sets out even more. The colors are wonderful, obviously, but it's not the colors, it's the length of the sleeves. That it's not, a workman would not wear that. So these kind of sets him apart for that. Make sense? 5 to 8.
Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of grain out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered around mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you intend to reign over us? Will you actually rule us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said.
Okay. Now, I asked what kind of person Joseph was, and someone said he could have been prideful. And that's not the first time someone answered that when we look at this. But let's meditate on this for a second. Joseph has a dream. Do you think he knows this is from God? We're speculating. It could be educated speculation.
I think so.
But do you think he feels that God is speaking to him?
Mhm.
And if so, do you think God told him to share the dream?
Possibly.
So if God told him to share the dream, again, he didn't have much tact on how he did it. But he just kind of goes to his brothers and said, "This is the dream that I have." The brothers kind of get ticked off. "Well, you think you're going to do this?" God is prophesying. He's saying in the future, this is what it's going to be. Now, the brothers, and even Joseph, I don't think have any idea what's coming. They don't understand the famine. They don't understand Egypt and what all lays in the future. God does. God is working behind the scenes. As we go through this, one point that I would love to have you walk away with is to realize that in everyday life, God is working behind the scenes.
Amen.
We may look at it and say, "I have no idea how this is going to work out for God's glory. I have no idea. I mean, you're going to throw me into a dry water, well. It's probably hard concrete. If there's no water in it, the concrete could have cracked and the water went away. So it's jagged, it's too high, he can't get out. And it's Daniel in the lion's den. What good can come from this, and why am I here? What did I do? I didn't do anything, and he's being persecuted for it. And how could that work out for benefits? We'll see that when we close out this chapter. But just as you walk away, because everybody has things, no matter online, if you're watching things, what's ever happening in your life, just realize that God is working behind the scenes, even when we don't think it or see it. So I look at this and say, okay, if he realized this was a dream from God, was it pride that caused him to reveal it, or did God say, "Now go tell"? We don't know. We don't know. Yes.
Just something that came up in my head was, I wonder if his father hadn't been sharing, I'm sure that his father had shared with him, "You're the son of the promise. You're here's how it's going to be." And so if he wasn't anticipating some of these things, and this is why I'm treating you special, and this is...
But he's not the son of the promise.
No.
Judah is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because Reuben sinned.
So could it be that
He's his dad's favorite.
Isaac is just trying to do what Abraham had done and trying to thwart the promise?
Jacob, you mean?
Jacob, yes.
Yeah. It was supposed to fall to Judah because the first 3 sinned. One with the sleeping with the concubine, the other 2 with the murder and killing the whole city, and that falls to the 4th one. So Judah should be, but Judah's going to mess it up.
Pretty
So-
quick.
Yeah.
So do you think Jacob shared his dreams from God with Joseph or any of the other 11?
Just going through, again, from chapters 25 to 35, Jacob seems like a very weak man.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Jacob, when his daughter gets,
Right.
and he does not stand up.
Right.
No.
Other times when he was taken advantage of, and he just seems like, it's one thing if you don't do it for yourself, but when your family is being attacked and you don't stand up for them. So to me, he's been a very weak man through this whole thing, and God's grace and mercy is there, not only for that, but because of the promise that God made to Abraham. We have a promise of eternal life. If you become a Christian, you have, and the Holy Spirit indwells in you, and then you go off and you live a different life or you do something else, God's promise is still there. A lot of blessings are lost, and you and I can't look at somebody and say, well, they were never saved. That would be a common answer, but we don't know that. You know, as Spurgeon would say, I can't come over here and lift your shirt up and see if you got an E on your chest and not for being elected. I don't know. Only God knows that. But their lifestyle is not showing like they're living that way. But who knows what the promise was. But God's promise will always be fulfilled. Man can mess it up as much as he wants. But God will get his way.
And does.
So, and there's a promise made to Abraham that from you will come the seed, and from that seed, you know, it would be, you can't even count the stars in the sky, it's holy goosebumps. But the entire world will be blessed because of this. That promise will come into effect. It hasn't yet, but it's still pending, but it will come to fruition. So, this is going to get interesting as we get into the next chapter. So, okay. I wrote a whole book on the book of Revelation because I said you cannot understand Revelation. Everybody wants to. Everybody wants to jump to the last book and get it, but they can't understand it if you do not understand the Old Testament. If you don't have a firm foundation of the Old Testament, the Revelation makes no sense to you because all the symbolism, all the pictures are explained in the Old Testament. I can't wait for Jewish people who will not touch the New Testament to either live through or read the book of Revelation, because the Old Testament, they're going to get it like crazy. I say that because of verses 9 and 11 coming up. Someone want to read that, please?
Then he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, Behold, I have dreamed another dream. Behold, the sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me. But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, What is this dream you have dreamed of? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow ourselves down to the ground before you? And his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the saying in mind.
So even his father rebuked him because I think he understood it completely. He understood completely that what this dream was. That Joseph does not have rule over his brothers or the father, even mother. So when you have the moon and the sun being the father, the moon being the mother who has passed away. Rachel has died. So I think that would have been the part that really would upset him. And then the 11 stars being the 11 brothers. All right, so now we have this picture. We know the dream. Joseph has a dream about the sun, the moon, and the 11 stars. Okay? We have this knowledge. We're going to fast forward to Revelation chapter 12, verse 1, which is in your notes. A great and wondrous sign appears in heaven. This is John seeing this. A woman clothed with the sun and with the moon under her feet and with a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth. If you just read Revelation, you think, well, who is this woman? What are we talking about? But if you have the story of Joseph and you understand the dream of Joseph, do you not connect the two? Yes, no?
Yes.
It comes so that now Revelation can be opened up. Now, some people will look at Revelation and say, well, the woman is Israel. Obviously, she's not a physical woman because she's pregnant, about to give birth. The birth is going to be the birth of the Messiah. From Israel, from the line of Judah, will come the Messiah. So this woman's about to give birth. Israel's about to give birth to Israel, to the Messiah. Sorry, and from that, the whole world will be blessed by it. Some people will say, well, this isn't Israel. This woman is not Israel. The woman's a church, because it's the church that's going to do this. Well, okay. Before I go, what do you say about that? I've heard this interpretation. It's not when the book of Revelation is not talking about Israel. This is talking about the church. What would you say? Mouths are opening, but nothing's coming out.
Where do we start?
Because in the tribulation, the ones who get sick, the church is gone.
Yeah.
And the Jews are the ones that, are the ones that are gonna be saved. And they're finally gonna see the Old Testament, like you said, they're gonna see Revelation.
Okay.
But why, Brian was saying, why does it say in Joseph's dream that there were 11 stars, and then here it says 12?
What are the 12 stars representing?
Those are the sons. The
12 tribes. Of who? 12 tribes of who? Of the church?
Israel.
Israel.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. But you tie the two together. It explains it, opens it up when you tie Joseph's dream to it. Now, those who will say this is the church, I'm not sure they can explain it really well theologically, because In their view, the church does go through the tribulation, or it's replacement theology, meaning that the church has taken the place of Israel because God's taken the blessing he promised Israel. Israel rejected him, so he's taken the blessing and given it to the church, which is heresy. That's not correct theology. So, but there's a bigger problem here. How does Paul present the bride of Christ, the church, to the groom? As a pregnant woman?
No, a virgin.
Paul presents the church as a pure virgin
Yes.
to the groom. Well, this woman's pregnant. There's an issue there. So we know it's not the church. We know it's Israel, because who is about to give birth? Israel and the Messiah. So when you look at this again, and that's where people kind of get off base with this. But it's important to understand the Old Testament, because right now we have this dream. Now, no one likes the dream, but we understand where the dream is going to come to be fulfilled. The first dream is fulfilled when they go to Egypt and they get into slavery. The second dream is not going to be fulfilled until we get to the tribulation period. So Joseph's second dream that took place thousands of years ago still hasn't been fulfilled, but it will be when we go into the tribulation and the Messiah is about to come. To my knowledge, Christ has not returned yet. So when that happens, that will be the tribulation period, and the second dream will be fulfilled. It will be fulfilled prophecy. Make sense?
Yep, makes sense.
All right. So John is seeing this, and she represents again not the church but Israel. The woman is Israel, and her roots go all the way back to Jacob and Rachel, and their 12 sons. How many sons did Jacob and Rachel have?
Two. Oh,
Jacob and Rachel? Or Jacob? How many sons did Jacob have? Yes, Rachel was 2. But how many sons did Jacob have?
12.
How many stars are there?
12.
He has 11 brothers, but he has 12 sons. So, Jacob understands immediately when he sees this dream, the sun is him, the moon is Rachel, the 11 stars are the brothers, and we understand the picture here and the parallel of that. So it kind of opens up the New Testament as well, which the Old Testament does quite often. So the brothers aren't happy. I think their silence speaks volumes. Dad rebukes them, but the brothers just, they're seething. They don't even say anything. If they do, it's not quoted. It's not set for primetime TV if they said something, so. All right, verses 12 to 17.
I'll give it a try.
Thank you.
Now his brothers went to the pasture. We'll start over. Now his brothers went to the pasture their father's flock near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "Are not your brothers pasturing the flock in Shechem? Come, I will send you to them." And he said to them, "Here I am." So he said to them, "Go now, see if it is well with your brothers and the flock, and bring me word." So he went to them in the valley of Hebron, and he came to Shechem. And the man found him wandering in the fields. And the man asked, "What are you seeking?" "I am seeking my brothers," he said. "Tell me, please, where are they pasturing the flock?" The man said, "They have gone away. For I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan.
Thank you. Thank you for reading. Why do all the brothers go, but Joseph's left behind?
because he's wearing his robe.
Yeah. I'm saying that's why I don't think he's taking the father's business. He's not taking the father's trade. Even though he's favored, he's left behind. And what does Dad do? Go check on those rascals and see what they're doing. Because he knows he's going to come back over and tell me what they're doing. Are they stealing things? Are they doing things to people? Are they watching the flock? What are they doing? It's interesting where they go, though. They're in Hebron and they go back to Shechem. What happened the last time they were in Shechem?
Not good thing.
They had to run out of there out of fear, because of all the killings and so on and so forth. So they go back there. Why in the world would they go back there? If you remember, Jacob bought some land there. So he bought some land, and then he was going to settle down. Well, they had the the whole the town being killed and so on and so forth. They had to get out of there, but he still owned the land. So he probably said, take them up there and make sure that they have the field there. Stay on our property. Don't cause any trouble. Don't get me in trouble. And so he sends his trustworthy son to go check on him. Depending on the path you take, there's a question there. Go ahead.
There is.
Well, the face says there's a question there.
I'm amazed at the mileage, how far away they were.
They were about 50 miles north. Yes. They're not, yeah. 20 miles is a day's walk, is a normal day's walk. So he's heading north about that. And depending on the path you took, it could be between 50 and 60, but from Hebron up to there is about 50 miles. It's about 30 miles north of Jerusalem. They're about 20 miles south of Jerusalem. So you're about 50 miles. He gets there and finds out what? He's missed him by 15 miles. Where he went to Dothan, this is the same place where Elijah is out, and the king of Syria is attacking him, and Elijah has he sees the angels around him, the chariots and so on and so forth, that same spot that happens. So they go up to Dothan, so he's told that, and he travels 15 more miles. Now, as he's coming up there, his brothers see him coming. What do you think they say? Oh, cool, here comes Joseph. Yeah. Are you kidding me? Dad sent him to go check on us. What is he going to tell Dad, Now he is 65 miles plus away from Dad's protection. And he's fair game. And you see when the second dream was announced, the brothers didn't say anything. Their silence spoke a lot, but now they're saying things. So with that said, verses 18 and 22. Thank you.
They saw him from afar, and before he came near them, they conspired against him to kill him. They said to one another, "Here comes this dreamer. Now let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we will say that a fierce animal devoured him, and we will see what becomes of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he rescued him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." And Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to their father."
Thank you. Thank you for reading. Well, Reuben, I don't know what your opinion of Reuben was when he slept with the concubine. But I tried to explain that. That might have been because he was afraid his mother was going to, be knocked down and so on and so forth. So he did it to protect mom. And now he's protecting the stepbrother with this. He steps up to do this. But as they see him coming, they're saying, you know what? This is kind of like when they put Jesus on the cross and they were mocking Jesus and saying, well, if he's the Messiah, let him take himself down. And they're mocking him. Well, they see Joseph coming and say, well, let's see what happens of his dreams now. We'll put him to death and we'll talk about us bowing down to him. And you see this rage, this mocking, what's happening there. But what they don't realize is if the dreams came from God, which we're told they were because they were prophetic, if they came from God, if they are rebelling against the dreams, are they rebelling against Joseph or are they rebelling against God? They're rebelling against God. And rebelling against God is never a good thing. You usually lose that battle. And that's what happens here. So Reuben steps up and says, you want to throw him into the well. And I'm saying the well because we see that verse 24. There's no water in it. Well, it's not just a pit. It's a dry water system. And they run deep. And again, there's probably broken concrete, broken hard on the bottom, because that's how the water would have seeped out. Otherwise, because you don't just throw away wells once you drink it unless something's wrong with it. So anyhow, but they have this mocking spirit there. And Reuben says, stop, we're not going to do this. 23 to 27. I have a note, I'm going to check for you. Someone, thank you.
So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the robe of many colors that he wore, and they took him and threw him into a pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with their camels bearing gum, balm, and myrrh on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers listened to him.
Okay, this is not just let's push him into this. The word here, when it says stripping of him, is like what's used in Leviticus 6:1. It's kind of like skinning of an animal. So this was violent. This was forceful. So when he was thrown into the well, he would have been already in poor shape being thrown in there. Because you say, well, why did he get out? Well, why did he? Well, he would have been attacked by a mob. It's like being attacked by a mob of angry dogs, and then being skinned alive. Basically, it's the same word that's used there in Leviticus. Now, I don't like to get ahead of myself, but go to Genesis 42. When they see this, they're going to look back and say, this is why things happen. And I just want you to understand how wrong this is, and eventually we understand the ways of our error. And in Genesis 42, look at verse 21. If everybody has that, we can read that.
They said to one another, surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we wouldn't listen. And that's why this distress has come upon us.
So we'll deal with distress when we get to chapter 42, but he tells us that he was distressed, he was begging, so you can kind of get a picture of what this looked like as they weren't mocking and joking, go, oh, push him in. You know, this was something that was done very, very forcefully and very violently. All right, so they're going against God because they're mocking the dreams. Verse 23 to 27. Did we just read that? We didn't, did we? Some people will say, have you heard that Joseph is kind of like Jesus? Have you heard the comparison between Joseph and Jesus? It's a very common comparison. That look tells me no. You're saying yes. You're saying yes. Okay. No. Okay. Sometimes if you get into a sermon or you get into theology, they will compare Joseph being Christ-like or foreshadow what Christ is going to go through and be kind of a picture of Jesus. We see the same thing with Joshua. People would do the same thing with Joshua in the Old Testament. So, well, let's look at Joseph and see if there's any comparison between him and some of the things that Jesus suffered as well. Is this situation, circumstance, a foreshadow of what's going to happen with Jesus thousands of years later? 23 to 27.
We read it.
I just read that.
You did a very good job with that. That was wonderful. Thank you for doing that. What happened? Now, first of all, both Joseph and Jesus are beloved by their father.
Right.
They both are stripped. You know, Jesus obviously is crucified on a cross. Joseph is thrown down into a pit. They are both declared cursed. You know, that Deuteronomy says he was hung on a tree is cursed by God. That's why Jesus had to be crucified, not stoned. Jesus was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, whereas Joseph is 20. Why only 20? Well, that goes back to Leviticus 27:5, which was the price of a young male. So 20 pieces of silver was the price, which when they saw how old he was, that would have been what they offered. That was biblical. Leviticus 27:5. They both were falsely accused. And what's interesting is before Jesus was crucified, he had the meal, he had the Last Supper with his disciples. And once the brothers do this, what do? They go and have a meal. They go and have a feast. Do you see do you see a foreshadowing of what's coming with the Messiah? You know, and again, Joseph plays such a big role in this. That's why people will compare him to a picture of Jesus before Jesus' incarnation, before Jesus comes to earth. All right. The Midianites, traders, come by. They draw Joseph up. They lift him out of the pit, and they sell him for 20 shekels of silver. They take him to Egypt. These people come from the great uncle Ishmael. You know, you have Isaac and Ishmael. This is the Ishmael clan coming by, and again, 20 pieces of silver is Leviticus 27. And taking them to Egypt, they're going to easily double their money. Egypt at this time has no enemies. They're very high in the slave market. They're very wealthy. They're very educated. I mean, this is a major part of the world at this point. So taking him down there and selling him in Egypt, they're at least going to double their money, if not more. So why not take the price of paying for his travel down there, feeding him for how many days it takes while they get there, because they're going to recoup their money and then some. Make sense? 29 to 33. We haven't read that one yet, right? That one's still got to be read, right?
No.
Go ahead.
When Reuben returned to the pit and saw that Joseph was not in the pit, he tore his clothes and returned to his brothers and said, "The boy is gone, and where shall I go?" Then they took Joseph's robe and slaughtered a goat and dipped the robe in the blood. And they sent the robe of many colors and brought it to their father and said, "This we have found. Please identify whether it is your son's robe or not." And he identified it and said, "It is my son's robe. A fierce animal has devoured him. Joseph is without doubt torn to pieces."
So Reuben tears his clothes not so much because of his brother, but because of his father. Realizing when they go home without him, what's going to happen to dad. So he mourns for that. So again, you get a picture of Reuben.
Where was Reuben? I mean, wasn't it his idea to sell him?
Was it Judah's idea or Reuben's idea?
It was Judah's
It was
idea?
Judah's idea.
So where was Judah? Because when he gets back, he looks in the pit and he's gone.
Yeah.
Like, where?
He went to Circle K for some coats.
He was getting stray sheep.
That's a good possibility, actually.
You don't like Circle K?
No.
He went to the Quick Mart for something to drink. Yeah, he wandered off, and they took advantage of that. They did obey him though, when he said, "Do not kill him." So they went as far as they could without doing that. The bloodshed was not there, but they did everything but that. There's a question? No comment?
Well, I think that Reuben must have not seen the traders coming by either, as he didn't know what had happened to the boy. And do you think that he was a little bit repentant of what he had done earlier, with sleeping with his dad's concubine?
I don't think he repented of that. I think he would do it again because he didn't protect his mom.
Okay.
He didn't protect the position his mom could have had. He was afraid his mom would lose her position.
So he didn't have a change of heart towards God.
Only he knows that. It doesn't. But we do see a character trait in him here.
Okay.
Both stepping up. And I think God was behind that because if Reuben did not speak up, what would have happened?
Yeah, Joseph.
And that would have ended the line of Judah. That would have ended the line of Judah, and that would have ended the promise that God had made to Abraham, which God was not going to allow to happen. Now, would he have sent an angel down? Would he have done something else? Possibly. If man tried to mess it up, I know God would have done something to make sure his plan was fulfilled. In this case, he put it on Reuben's heart to say, "No, we're not going to kill him." Was Reuben okay with them throwing him into the pit? I mean, the thing was, we're going to throw him in there and let him starve to death. He's still going to die. No one's going to come and pull him out. There's won't be any bloodshed. Reuben said no bloodshed. So we just want him dead, and we will have a feast, and we will let him be, and whatever wounds he has, and he won't get any food. And eventually he's going to die in the pit. Maybe a wild beast would jump in there and get him. Who knows how, but they're pretty confident he's not going to survive this. And then greed kicks in. As they see the traders come, they go, well, let's make some money with this. And when you got, 10 of them, there's not a whole lot of money. It's like, 2 shekels each. So, but anyhow.
But didn't Reuben earlier in verse 18 to 22, where he said, "Do not lay a hand on him, that he might rescue him of their hand to restore him to his father"?
Yes.
Didn't he kind of secretly plan that he was going to
Bring him back, yeah. That's why I said no bloodshed.
Okay.
So, and they said, well, we obeyed him, but there's no bloodshed. But he's going to die down there. So when Reuben comes back, he looks at the pit and says, where's the boy?
Amazing.
Yeah, so again, we don't know all the details, how far he went, how far Circle K was or anything else. We just know that somehow he was distracted doing something and the guys acted behind his back.
Also, I wonder about Reuben's character. If he was really gonna defend his brother, I mean, if somebody was going to take somebody and throw them into a pit, or if they were gonna kill him, and I was going to stand in the way and say, "No, I'm bringing him back to Dad," then I would take a much stronger. He was trying to please both sides, it feels
And he might say, you could rough him up a little bit and teach him a lesson, see what his dreams are
Right.
next time.
Right.
But no bloodshed.
Right, and he wanted to rescue them out of, and return him to his father.
Well, that's why he
Like-
mourns so much, because his dad won't see him now.
Mhm.
So you see him mourning, you see him defending, and again, that becomes 2 character traits that are good traits.
Right.
So being the firstborn, if mom's position was not threatened, would he have sinned the way that he sinned? Again, speculation. But it doesn't seem like he did what he did out of desire for self-gratification. It seems like he did it to protect his mother, which scriptures kind of paint that picture. Yeah. All right, 34 to 35.
Then Jacob tore his garments and put on sackcloth on his loins and mourned for his son many days. All of his sons and all of his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted, saying, "No, I shall go down to Shul to my son mourning." Thus the father wept for him.
So the typical time of mourning is a week, according to the Genesis 50, or it could be as much as a month, depending on who it was that passed away. Deuteronomy 34 says that. But he's saying, it won't be a week, it won't be a month. I am going to be mourning him for the rest of my life.
Oh, unto death.
Yeah,
He's going to go to the underworld.
yes.
Mourning.
Until I die, to the day I die, I will be mourning him. It won't pass in a week, it won't pass in a month. That's how heartbroken he is over this. And again, you have family traits here. Years ago, Jacob used the skin of a goat to deceive his father. Now the blood of a goat is being used to deceive him. You know, so that kind of goes full circle. Verse 36. Meanwhile, they sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard. So, let's play what if. And I asked you early on, what was the question I asked you?
Where was God's hand?
I know I asked a question. What was it?
Where was
How would
God's
you
hand in all
describe
of this?
Joseph if you were gonna tell his story?
Well, I asked you, where is the hand of God
Where's the hand?
in all of this?
He lived.
Yeah, where's the hand of, you look at this and you say, where is God's hand in this? And look,
It's in everything.
I don't know what page, because my print's bigger than yours, but under verse 36, I got 14 points there.
Wow.
Look at those 14 points. If his family wasn't messed up and weird and his brothers would never have sold him as a slave, what would have happened? If Joseph's brothers never sold him as a slave, he would never have gone to Egypt. If he never went to Egypt, he would never have been sold to Potiphar. If he was never sold to Potiphar, Potiphar's wife would never have falsely accused him. If Potiphar's wife never falsely accused him, then he would never be put in prison. If he's never put in prison, he would have never met the baker and the butler. If he never met them, he would never have interpreted the dreams. If he didn't interpret their dreams, he would never have interpreted Pharaoh's dream. And if he never interpreted Pharaoh's dream, he would never become prime minister, second in Egypt. If he never became prime minister, he would never have wisely prepared for the famine. If he never prepared for the famine, then his family back in Canaan would have died in the famine. If his family back home died, then the Messiah could not have come from a dead family. If the Messiah did not come forth, then Jesus never came. If Jesus never came, then we are all dead in our sins and without hope in this world.
So it's a big deal.
Yes. So if all these events didn't happen, look what it was a domino. So I'm saying God is involved in everyday activity. If you look at those lists, those probably aren't some things that we want to do. Hey, can I go to prison for a while? Hey, can I be ignored? Hey, can I be accused of trying to attack someone's wife? Hey, can I? Not things we would option for, but part of the things that led to the ultimate goal of all of us having Jesus as our Lord and Savior. Now, that gets interesting. And again, I brought you to Genesis 45. Joseph and his brothers realized that God was working behind the scenes. You know, later on, when God sent me ahead of you to preserve you, a remnant on earth to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then it was not you who sent me here, it was God. So that becomes what they all understand later when it's kind of late for them. All right, comments or questions? We're doing great on time.
Well, one thing, he had such a disastrous result when he shared his dreams, but he never stopped sharing them. So maybe God did tell him to share them.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't know. So again, we want to say that he was prideful. Well, I'm going to do this and you're going to bow to. We don't know the body language, the tone. There wasn't a lot of tact, but we don't know if God said, go tell your brothers. Go share this with your family. Because if he didn't, would they have been upset? Would this happen? And again, that could have been sharing the dreams could have been the first domino to everything. And God is not restricted by time. So he sees everything at once. And knowing all that had to take place. So if he would have said, don't tell anybody, and Joseph kept it secret, would the brothers have been upset? Would him being a tattletale or him bringing bad reports back to dad been enough to want to kill him? Yeah, I don't know. How much do they hate him? I don't know. Just the fact that he's dad's favorite, was that enough? Again, it's speculation, but the whole point is we see where the dominoes come, and that the Lord is covering it all. You know? So,
I have a question.
all right.
If-
Yes. Yes.
When we were doing the women's Bible study and we were studying about Leah and Rachel and the line, the question was, why Judah when you have Joseph over here who does everything right? And then Judah, look at what he does, but the line of Jesus comes through Judah. The
Yes.
tribe of Judah,
Yes.
not Joseph. But Leah turned her heart towards God. And Rachel she was the spoiled one.
And again, did his own curse upon whoever stole the idol
Yes, the idol.
play into it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he put the curse on whoever stole it, not knowing it was his own love of his life who stole the idol.
But God showed us that he used Judah,
Yeah.
who was faulty, not Joseph, who didn't sin.
Well, that's a good transition, because we're going to see what Judah really did in this next chapter. But he does get a blessing later on. So Judah's the fourth. There's the next in line is the fourth one. And Esau is chapter 36.
Can I ask a question? Okay, sorry, it's still about the topic, but I've been sitting here thinking that Joseph was a prophet. He told people what was going to be coming up and tried to get them ready for it and all this kind of stuff. But we never consider him, his dreams were prophetic. We never consider him a prophet. So maybe that's why were prophets obligated to share what they knew?
If God told them, they are God's mouthpiece to the people. The priests are the people's mouthpiece to God, and the prophets are God's mouthpiece to the people. There are many prophets that we don't know the names in the Bible. So to call Joseph a prophet, did God use him that way? We don't know. I mean, he spoke to him through dreams, obviously. He gave him the ability to do that, to get him to second in charge of a major world power. Is he a prophet for that point? You could say that, but was he called? Was he commissioned to be a prophet? I don't know.
see what you're saying.
Yeah, I don't know. Because he wasn't on call to say, okay, Lord, what do you want me to tell the people? So it was kind of God saying, hey, I'm gonna speak to you, and I'm gonna speak to you through dreams. Again, he made appearances to Abraham and to Isaac. He doesn't make appearance to Joseph. He speaks to Joseph via dreams. So God is still speaking to his patriarchs. Is that just part of the way that God speaks and reveals himself, or would you call him a prophet? It doesn't say that seems to be the banner he carries, but I'm not going to say that God didn't use him, because he did to speak to people. And like a true prophet, he was rejected, and people were upset with him and wanted to put him to death, which was how prophets were treated. I mean, you're thinking through it though. That's pretty good. Esau is chapter 36. Joseph is chapter 37. Judah becomes chapter 38. And as I said, if this was a TV script, I would not be able to air this show on the air.
Well, nowadays, maybe.
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. Should we read this, or just kind of, how do we handle this one? Do we just volunteer for John and let John?
Just read your
Alice, do
explanation.
that, Seymour.
It is. We can ask God about this one. Let's do verse 1 and 5. We're safe here. Anybody? Thank you.
And it came about at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira. Judah saw there a daughter of certain Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he took her as a wife and had relations with her. And she conceived and gave birth to a son, and he named him Then she conceived again and gave birth to a son, and she named him Onan. She gave birth to yet another son, and she named him Shelah. And it was at Chezib that she gave birth to him.
You did great with that.
I go fast though, because
I don't know if you follow the what I'm in. I usually use the ESV when I record the scriptures. I did with this one, and I erased it. The language is a little bit different in the ESV. It's a little bit softer here. This is the New American Standard I'm putting in this chapter, but the verbiage is pretty raw in the ESV with some of this. But anyhow, so he goes down and he marries a Canaanite woman. We know that Abraham went as far to make his servant Eliezer to swear that he would not allow a Canaanite to become the wife of his son. Throughout the whole family line, we were told that you do not marry into the Canaanites. Judah is the focus of this chapter, not Jacob. Jacob is mentioned, but Jacob's not even mentioned, but Judah becomes the purpose here. This is when, especially teenage girls, you don't look at somebody and say, oh, he's so cute, but he's not a Christian. But if I date him or go out with him, maybe he'll be a Christian. You know, I don't believe in missionary dating. I've seen it crash and burn way too many times. It usually goes the other way. Well, is that biblical? Yeah, you don't marry the Canaanites. You don't get involved with that. It would take you to another direction because God knows after a while you'll be following other gods. So we get a picture here. People say, well, that's just rude. That's not nice. Well, it's biblical. And it's for your own protection and your own relationship with the Lord. So those are boundaries you should put up. And we see it here where Judah kind of breaks that. Judah takes a wife, verse 6. His firstborn, which is a very common practice for a dad to find a wife for his firstborn. And the wife's name is Tamar. But the firstborn son, we don't know what he did. He was okay to get a wife, but then he's so evil that the Lord kills him. The Lord puts him to death. So now Tamar is a widow. Now in the culture, and I think you understand this, the Levite culture, the Levite marriage, the standard is if there's other brothers, and the first brother who has not been able to have a child, you know, if he dies and his wife is a widow, the next brother will come along and take her as a wife. If he has a son with her, the son is for the first one, not for him, so he gets the firstborn rights from that. And that's just a way that you protect the family line. And it allows the widow, the mother now, to have a son to take care of her in her old age. So it's a custom to protect both, the family line and the widow. So the second son does the same thing. He takes the brother's wife, but he refuses to have a child with her. So he has relations with her, but he does not impregnate her on purpose. And that gets God to the point to where he says, you're done too. And God kills him, puts him to death. So now Tamar is a widow twice. And Judah is looking at this. He has a third son. And he's looking at Tamar and saying, look, you killed two of my sons. You're not getting a third one. And the third one at this point is too young. So he says, when he becomes older, when he's at the age of marriage, then I will allow you to be his wife as well, and we will see if this does not go the way it's supposed to go. He tells her that, but he's deceiving her. He has no plans to offer his third son to her to be a wife there. So he tells her, the only real option you have is to remain a widow. So go back to your father's house and be a widow. Now, he doesn't like her anyhow, doesn't really seem to have any compassion for her, and we see that as it moves on. But twice she's still childless, and she's a widow, and she's going back to live as a widow in her dad's house. She's watching this next son grow up. And when he gets to the point to where he's old enough to take her as a wife, it's not arranged.
No.
And she realized now that Judah has no intentions of fulfilling the promise. So she takes matters into her own hands. She decides to come up with a plan. She doesn't care how far she has to go for it, but she takes a plan. Now, here's the question. What she's about to do is going to be mind-boggling, but if she doesn't do it, what happened to the line of Judah?
That wouldn't happen. It would be
It's gone.
Mhm.
So eventually, Judah, because his wife dies, and he becomes a widow. So he's going to leave town to go share his sheep. And she knows that he's been a widow long enough. The time of mourning has passed. And he is going to want some female companionship. I'm trying to put this as easy as I can. Yes. So she knows this. Now, it's kind of like when you have harvest time, when you have the harvest field, and you come into bringing the harvest. What's the platform? Yes.
The
The threshing floor. Thank you.
Time of celebration.
Yes, but the prostitutes come out because it's money time, it's harvest time, they're getting money, so the prostitutes will come onto a threshing floor. That was a picture of Ruth with Boaz, when Ruth laid at Boaz's feet, because that was not an appropriate thing to do in the culture. That was, hey, I'm available for you, and so on and so forth. So much like they do in the threshing floor, this happens when they're going with the sheep to shear the sheep, because they're going to be selling the wool. So prostitutes will line up, and they will do that if you will hire one of these prostitutes. They're going to have magic for you, as if they become fertility goddesses, basically. And your crops will grow better, and your sheep everything will be a blessing for you. So all you have to do is stop and visit the prostitute. So Tamar knows this is the culture. She knows her father-in-law is now a widow. Mourning has passed on his route. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, so while he's on his way to Vegas, she's waiting for him. It's a great risk that she's taking, because she's in disguise. She took off her widow garments and she put on this other garment. Had she been caught, she would have been put to death.
Right.
Because the daughter of priests cannot do this. So it's a risk that she takes. She's only looking for one customer, and that's Judah. Judah comes along. They have a business deal. Verses 12 to 23. And they're negotiating, and he asks, how much? She says, what will you give me? He says, I'll send you a young goat. Well, she knows that he doesn't have the goat with him, so she says, well, leave something behind as proof. And what does he leave behind?
His staff and
His cord. The staff and cord is something you wear around your neck. So when you look at the seal and the cord you would wear around your neck, and the staff was because of his position, it was ordained. It was nice. It wasn't a Kmart special. So this is basically, in our culture, he left behind his driver's license and social security card. Because what he left behind identified who he was. So he has this business proposition, the business deal is consummated. He leaves behind his ID and he goes about his business. He goes back home and he sends a Canaanite friend to go pick up his ID. Hey, go get the harlot over there. This is where she's at. Get my ID. Give her the goat. Well, the harlot's not there because she's not a harlot. So now, to save face and not to go and tell everybody what he did, he just says, "I'll let it go. I'll get a new license." So he has no idea what's happening. Okay, is this kind of making sense without going past PG-13?
right.
All right. So Tamar still has the desire to produce a child for her deceased husband. In fact, she believes it's her right. So what she's doing, she believes she's in the right of doing this. And she has to be deceitful because he's being deceitful. And she cannot confront him with this because he would just, she has no care for her, no concern for her, and she has no right to do that. Verse 24. 3 months later, after the first trimester, Judah's informed, hey, did you hear about your daughter-in-law, Tamar? Yeah, she's starting to show. She's pregnant. And do you realize that this pregnancy was conceived by prostitution? That's how she did this? He said, oh my goodness. Well, what's the scripture say? Then she should be put to death. Bring her out here and she should be burned. Leviticus 21:9. So he says, finally, I get to permanently remove her from my life. My third son will not be in danger. She's killed 2 of my sons. Not that his sons were wicked. It's her fault. So this is a chance because of her immorality is a chance to get rid of her completely. But he's not aware of what she has. When she's confronted, she says, yes, it was immorality, but this is the man who made me pregnant. I have his license and social security card. And what does Judah have to do now?
Admit that he sinned too.
He does not admit he sinned with her. What was the sin he committed? He does admit he sinned, but we would think because he impregnated her would be the sin. That's not the sin.
Withholding his son.
Yes.
Withholding his son.
Withholding his son was the sin, because that is the line, that's what happens when a widow is left widow without a child. So that was the sin. Hiring the prostitute and impregnating her, that they're out there, and that's what happens. So there's no sin for that. But he gets caught by not allowing her to have the sin. Now this gets interesting. When it came time for her to have birth, guess what? Twins! Twins! And she's in labor, verse 27 to 30. One of the babies puts a hand out, and the midwife takes and ties a scarlet thread around his hand, saying, this is number one. Then the hand goes back in. And then the other brother comes out without the scarlet thread. That's the youngest one. Now you have the theme of the youngest one, of the older one serving the youngest. And you see it happening here. What happened with Jacob and Esau? You had twins wrestling in the mother's womb. What happens here with Perez? You have the twins wrestling in the mother's womb. So the same thing that happened back then, and again, the reversal of firstborn rights are reversed. So just as, again, the family dynamics repeat themselves again. Twins wrestling in the mother's womb, the first right of the oldest being reversed, and it happens again. Now God uses this event to continue the line of Judah. When you go to the book of Ruth in the Old Testament, or you go to Matthew, there are genealogies there. There's 10 lines of genealogies. In Matthew's, most people go to Matthew chapter 1, and so-and-so begot so-and-so begot so-and-so begot so-and-so. We begin in verse 18. Because we don't need the begots. We just need to, okay, what does Matthew say? But in those begots, there's 5 women. 4 of them have committed sexual sin. 2 are a Canaanite, 1's a Hittite. So they're from other lines. But yet, without those women with sexual sin from other groups, not being Jewish, the line of Judah does not work. The Messiah does not come. What is God, as Holy Gospels, what is God trying to say? That from the very beginning, there's been hope for Gentile nations. When he made the blessing with Abraham, that through him the whole world would be saved, it wasn't that the Jews were God's favorite. You had the apple of God's eye. But why? Because they're special people, because they're better, because they shower more? No, because that's who God chose. And as God chose them, the choosing was, I am going to be your king. You won't need anybody else. The rest of the world will look at you, see how much I love you, see how much I bless you, and they're going to ask, how do you get blessed so much? And they're going to say, it's because we worship the one and only God. And the other nations then will worship me as well, because they want the blessing that poured upon you, and it will be okay, the whole world. Jew, Gentile, everybody will have salvation. That was the plan. Israel said, hey, we got a special deal. God picked us, so we're going to keep it to ourselves. If you're not Jewish, you're out. So I kind of say, what would you do if you had brown eyes and I said, only blue-eyed people get to go to heaven? How would you feel?
Left out.
Yeah, you can't change your eye color. You can change your hair color, you can change other things, but you cannot change your eye color. So if you got brown eyes, and the Bible said only blue eyes get to go to heaven, that's how God designed it. He tells you in advance if you're going to heaven by giving you blue eyes. You would say there's no hope for me. And that was the message the Gentiles received from the Jews, not from God. So, and again, when you go back here and look at these genealogies, God used this event. What event did he use? He used a woman being deceitful, becoming a prostitute, a man having relations with her, impregnating her, and all this stuff, that's the event that God uses to keep the line of Judah in place.
He works all things
There's
for
hope.
good.
Yeah, where does that make sense?
Lands on that
You know?
one.
Now, we don't know this, and I'm not trying to play God, but when God played this all out, was that the plan? Now God knows everything, you know, so he might have said, I know Judah's going to mess up, so I got it covered, don't worry about it. But would it have been, Judah, give her your third son, let the third son be the husband, let the husband produce a child, and the line is fine. But Judah said no, the son said no, you know, so God said, all right, guys, if you want to be that way, we're going to do it this way. You know, so I think God's plan is always perfect, and people, we try to mess it up, but God will get his way. No matter what, God will get his way.
God's plan is perfect, people
It is,
aren't.
it is.
People.
And no matter how much we try to get God's plan off course, it will not happen. So either we're with him, he'll either go with us, or he will go around us. You know, and that's the lesson here is not just a lesson of Judah, it's a lesson for all of us to understand that if God says, this is what I want, you can fight against it all you want, but God will get his way, either with us or around us. So, make sense?
Yep.
Makes
I will let
sense.
you read that chapter on your own. I wouldn't read it from the ESV, but I would
That's
read
the
it.
version I read from.
I do too. And I read that, and I had my wife read it, and I went, I'm going to have John do this. So, comments or questions?
I think it's interesting to look at both of the stories we just read through
Mm-hmm.
and to see just how much tragedy there is, like we just talked about, that like this was God's plan or this is how he makes it happen, and how much time goes by before the brothers come to Joseph to ask for food, and how much time we sit and wonder, where is God in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And he's there the whole time. And we can look back in Joseph's life or Judah's life and we can see where God is working. But in my own life, I find myself feeling alone if I don't hear from God for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Or if I'm going through a hard time, and that's the draw I got.
Yeah. And again, it's a life lesson. And it, as you mature in the Lord, you start understanding these things. And at some point, you got to say, I don't get it, but I trust you. You know, and that's why, you know, salvation is through faith, but grace, God's grace upon us, and allowing us to even have that faith. The fact that we even understand this is God's grace. You know, so because we shouldn't get any of this, and it's proof that his patriarchs did not understand this, and he met them face to face and spoke to them directly. You know, so we have, I won't say we just have his word, but we don't have that personal connection. And it's easy to point fingers, but we do the same thing. People are people. We haven't changed.
Right.
You know, and God's plan hasn't changed. And
And we were talking about that earlier, about how when somebody's pointing at like Judah's saying like, Tamar, you did this, and he's got all these other fingers pointing back at him.
yeah.
Because look at all the sin that you did, buddy. Like,
Do you realize if Israel would have done what God asked them to do, going back to Deuteronomy, do you realize how small the Old Testament would be?
let's go all the way back to the garden.
Yes.
Yeah,
Mic drop right there.
yeah. But we can't be perfect, and the garden can't be perfect. But
Yeah.
there's a whole teaching on the garden being like a temple and being a place of worship. There's a teaching there we could do sometime. But yeah, but just go back to the Pentateuch, the Torah, and say if Israel, from Deuteronomy, if Israel would have just did what God said, you would have the Pentateuch and probably Psalms, maybe Proverbs,
Well,
because all the prophets are saying, get back in line. You know, just do this. You might have Esther. You know, that was out of her hands, but it would be it wouldn't be what it is. Yes.
One of the things that I was reminded is when Allison started getting into Bible study.
She's doing a great job, isn't she?
Yeah, she really is. She's devouring it. But she kept saying, you know, she was astonished about how bad most of these guys were and the things they were doing. And her takeaway is that, wow, if God could work with these people, he will work with anybody.
How about
He
that?
will work
Gives us
for
all hope.
anybody too, right? So it was an encouragement that she came to by reading these terrible stories. Because if this is who God worked with, then he can work with me.
Yeah, I'm not so messed up as I thought I was, huh? 'Cause look at these people. That's true. All right, people online, we're going to say goodnight to you. We'll see you again next week. We're going to spend some time here